Good morning everyone and welcome to the meeting of the Corporate Parenting Panel. If we can start with agenda item 1, election for chairman. Can I ask for nominations for the chairman of the panel for 22-23 please? Councillor Matthews.
Yes, I'm very pleased to nominate Councillor Stephen Rowe, who's been a very successful chairman to date. So I'd like to propose Councillor Rowe. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Matthews. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Higgs.
I'd like to second that proposal.
Thank you. Are any further nominations? Okay, I'll take a vote on Councillor Rowe being the chairman of the committee for 22-23. All those in favour? That's unanimous. I'll let you take the chair.
Got it. Thank you very much. We now need to move on to the first item for me, and that's for vice chairman. Could I have any proposals, please? Page number. Have I lost it? Got it. Yep, reading off the wrong page there. So the second item is for the election of vice chairman, and actually I'm happy to nominate Councillor Cleo Perriton-Williams for vice chairman of this panel. Do we have any more nominations? And could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Higgs.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to agree with your proposals and happy to support your recommendations.
Thank you very much. Then we'll now vote on that. All those in favour, please raise your hands. That means we've got none against and none abstentions. Okay. Sorry, I'm just checking we're quorate, but we are. Right, so thank you. Councillor Cleo Perriton-Williams is appointed as the vice chairman for this panel for 2022-23. Before we move on with the main business of this meeting, can I remind you that if you wish to ask a question in the course of the meeting, you can please raise your hand. Can I also remind members of the panel to switch on their microphones when invited to speak close to the microphone, and to switch their microphone off after you make your contributions. Requests to speak will be collated between the two of us. Please can we keep your questions and contributions succinct and concise. We'll now move on to the formal agenda. Apologies for absence. Emily, do we have any apologies, please?
Thank you, Chairman. We received apologies from Councillor Callum Cook and Mark Whittington. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we now move on to the item 5, minutes of the meeting of the panel on the 12th of May 2022. This item is to confirm the minutes of our previous meeting, which can be found on pages 3 to 8 of the agenda pack. I propose that they are a correct record. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Higgs. Those in favour? Thank you. So that's unanimous. Item 6. Sorry.
Declarations of interest.
Oh, my apologies. Yep, I'm rushing through it. Item 4 is declarations of interest. Do any members wish to declare any interests? Obviously, we can take them as we go through if something comes up. Now we're on 6, aren't we? Announcements by Chairman, Executive Councillor and Lead Officers. There's nothing from the Executive Councillor. I've got one item which I want to bring up here, and that is that we had requested for suggestions where district councils might be able to help the corporate parenting side, and I'd just like to ask Andy Morris just to read out what he's come up with and then just say what we're going to do or what we would like to do.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Rowe. Yeah, it was back in March the members asked me to write basically a wish list or a list of what would be ideal to add to our core offer for our looked after children and care leavers. So I did that, and I sent an email to Councillor Rowe, and we were looking at ways of actually approaching this and with our district council colleagues. So what we're going to do, Councillor Rowe and I are going to go out and do some briefings to the executive of the district councils and to their chief executives about corporate parenting, what the responsibilities are, and the fact that, you know, in the regulations it states that two-tier authorities, the district councils, also hold that corporate parenting responsibility. So we're going to go out, do some of that briefing, build members' knowledge and build some of the senior officers' knowledge about what their responsibilities are. And in that, we're going to approach district councils about guaranteed job interviews for care leavers, as long as they benchmark for the position. District councils to work to organise work experience and employment opportunities for our young people in district councils. There's a lot of services that district councils run that the county don't, that we currently don't make fully use of, I guess. Wide and free leisure access from all the district councils. For example, I've got one young person at the moment in Lincoln who raised with me the other day that she can't get to North Stephen on the bus to access the free gym membership that North Stephen offer our young people because Lincoln City don't. So there's a bit of an inequality there about what district councils are offering. So we're going to speak to senior members about that, and also talk to each district about having a lead member within the district authority to kind of raise the profile of corporate parenting. And then the final one that Councillor Rowe and I are going to deal with back in LCC is free bus travel for young people, and looking at how we can support free access to travel for all of our care leavers. Looking at, if you look at unitary authorities in London, etc., travel in London is very easy. You can travel across many different areas very quickly, and a lot of areas, for example, Manchester offer their Manchester and Wolverhampton offer their care leavers free bus travel. In a county the size of Lincolnshire, we know that the geography of Lincolnshire is a big issue, so we're going to be approaching the local authority here in LCC about securing free bus transport. So Councillor Rowe and I guess we're going to go do a little bit of a tour of Lincolnshire and raise the profile of this agenda.
Yes, thank you, Andy. I'm thinking that we'll develop this and let you know, but obviously if members want to come with us to their appropriate areas, then that's great. Just a quick comment for Andy, which I never thought of when we spoke about it before. Of course, North Highcombe has got a sports centre which comes under NKDC, so probably your Lincoln resident could actually easily get somewhere because there are plenty of buses to North Highcombe.
It's the price of buses as well. You've got young people, it all comes together in the end.
Thank you. Right. Janice Spencer, do you have anything you just want to bring up? Thank you. So we now move on to item 7, Children in Care Performance Report Quarter 4. This item is on page 11 to 36 of the agenda pack. The report will be presented by Janice. We will take questions at the end. Thank you, Janice.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. So this is quarter 4 performance, so it's year end. It's up to March 22. As you will see that sadly we have not achieved our targets on 10 of the performance indicators, and that is very much still post-pandemic related. We are hopefully seeing recovery in some of the quarter 1 figures, which you will see at the next corporate parenting panel. Our fostering and adoption of children in care aged 10 to 16, we have seen that reduce slightly. Obviously, we have had a number of foster carers haven't returned to fostering following the pandemic. They've made decisions regarding their life choices and lifestyles. We have got a proactive recruitment continuing, and sadly, for the first time in a long time, we've seen a significant number of young children requiring residential provision, so they've ended up having to go into a different type of provision. Our number of children in care remains under our target, which is good. That's 49 per 10,000. That is below national average and below our stat neighbours. Again, stability of placements of children in care, that didn't achieve target. That relates again very much to the pandemic, where in the past when we had that bigger fostering household cohort that we could draw upon to place young people, We haven't had that in the way that we have had previously, and occasionally that's meant that we've not had the opportunity to match children in the same way as we would have wanted to, and that's meant that children have sadly had to move. We've also seen a number of young people disrupt their placements for a whole variety of reasons. Again, some of it is related to the pandemic. Being locked up, being cooped up has been quite a challenge, as you can imagine, for some of our young people. Although, having said that, we're all hopefully out and about as normal. The stability of children and children in care, the length of placement, again, we haven't achieved that, and that is very similar reasons. The challenges that young people are presenting as they're coming into care are probably more extreme than we've witnessed previously, and that has meant that carers have had some difficulty. We have got lots of support. Yesterday I was very fortunate to attend a matching event, and we had some of our carers come and talk about some of the work that they're doing to support our children, and actually some of the behaviours that they are having to deal with is quite difficult, but they are finding solutions, and the foster care and community are really supportive of each other. Our percentage of children in care with an up-to-date health check, as you can see, that's not too far off, which is a credit to our health colleagues. They've worked really hard to make sure that our children in care have received their health checks. Our percentage of children in care with an up-to-date dental check, again, you will see is improving, although not yet at target. And I think in the same way as there is for many of us, the challenges of accessing an NHS dentist, I think I can see Polly nodding her head there, is really difficult. The percentage of children in care with an up-to-date immunisation, again, you will see is making improvement, and our health colleagues have got a very clear plan in place to address that. The 16, 17-year-olds of children in care who are participating in learning, again, we have a very ambitious target, and that hasn't been achieved. And similarly, they have experienced a number of challenges that other young people have experienced throughout the pandemic and beyond. And again, with our care leavers in education, employment or training, Lisa will talk a little bit more about that when she presents her report, her annual report on the leaving care service. Children in care persistent absent rate, this is very much above what we would have wanted it to be, but very much is aligned to the pandemic and some of the challenges that young people were facing in going to school during that period of time. And as you will see in the narrative and the commentary, that we're not that much outside of the national figure for that particular performance indicator. But I am hoping that when we report again, we will see a big improvement with regards to that. And then again, the percentage of children in care with achieving their maths and English and maths GCSEs has not achieved target in the way that we would have wanted them to. And that very much is related to some of the challenges that they've seen, as have all young people over the last 2 years. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Janice. Do we have any questions? Councillor Higgs.
Thank you, Chairman. Janice, do you think that the wider and more extreme reactions of children coming into care is purely down to lockdown, as it's been for the last couple of years, or do you think that this is a trend that we're going to see across the country, that more and more children come to us with more and more extreme difficulties? And if that's the case, do we as a corporate parent provide specialist locations for these sort of children? Because I don't know whether when they come in, if they come into a residential home, there must be a certain disturbance naturally anyway when children come in and meet children that are established in the centre. And I just wonder whether we're just seeing a new trend of child coming into care for the authority. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hay. Yeah, that's a really important point. I think the lockdown was a perfect storm for many families in terms of the support networks that they would had readily available to them weren't available. So I think some of the behaviours that we are witnessing are related to that. And you're absolutely right, we have actually already started to begin to address some of those challenges. So I think we've spoke previously about we're moving the children with disability respite to St Francis School. That's got a beautiful residential provision there that we've reconfigured so that the children with disabilities can access that. And then we are converting the home, which will be called Robin House, to what we're calling a therapeutic residential home. And that will be for the 6 to 12-year-olds, because I have to say, I've been doing this job now for over 35 years, and we've never experienced some of the challenges that the younger generation are presenting with. So we've recognised that. We've got a specialist resource that it will be multidisciplinary. We've got health colleagues that will be working alongside our residential staff. And our aim is hopefully to, when those children need to come in, is to stabilise and regulate their emotions and work with foster carers in the hope that we can then move them back into a family environment. So I think you're right. I think it is a trend. We are preparing to address that. In Louth, we're going to be building a brand new 6-bedded residential home. And again, that will be very much around supporting these young people who cannot be safely managed in foster placement. And sadly for those young people, what we have to do at the moment for many of them is send them into out-of-county provision, which isn't the answer. So we've recognised that, and we are increasing what we call our residential estate, and we are currently looking at a place in Thirlby, which is Bourne, Stamford way, around, and just looking at what we could do there to increase the number of residential beds.
If I could come back with one quick question. I mean, the extra pressure that this must be putting on staff must be, I'd like to go on record in offering our support as members, total support to the staff, because they're working under extremely difficult times, and the vocation of the job is perhaps more important than the financial reward for doing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haig. That will mean a lot to the staff, and you're absolutely right. They are working under considerable pressure, but they're still doing a fantastic job, our foster carers and our residential staff. You know, without them, we I don't know where we'd be. We're really fortunate, even though we are struggling at the moment in Lincolnshire. When you look at other local authorities, the commitment, the passion and the dedication is second to none, and I'm really proud of our service.
Councillor Matthews.
Thank you. Can I ask one short technical question, and I've got several more. When is quarter 4?
March 22.
Ending or beginning? Ending March 22. Okay, thank you very much. I want to echo what my colleague Councillor Haig has said. I know you're working your socks off, but you must be disappointed to see that you've achieved 8 targets, but not achieved 10, and that means there's a heck of a lot of red showing on that indicator. You will not be surprised that I'm particularly interested in 2 things. Children in care who participate in learning. The reason I asked about the dates was it said we took part in a DFE pilot project which allowed us to do all sorts of things for the virtual school, and yet despite that additional spend and commitment, the numbers have gone down, and that's not healthy, because it suggests that either we've got a completely intractable client cohort, or we're pointing in the wrong direction. So I continue to be concerned about that, because I've asked previously if we're going to have a report on what are the issues that are causing children to not engage. We've had some money and a project to look at that. So that's, and I'm sure you're disappointed as well. But what I'm saying is it's odd that at the time we put additional resource and it's got worse. The next one down, care leavers, employment and training, is up from 52.3% to 53.1%. That's not significant. not in any way. It's the same number to all intents and purposes. It's less than 1 percentage point higher. School absence rates 35% or thereabouts. I can't get to that bit of the page, but it struck me that it was quite high. So that's a whole host of stuff about our children in care not engaging with attending schools and education, which is not good, because if you like, that's their route to growth. Well proven. The other thing that I'm intrigued in here is mental health issues and reference to mental health support from children in care. I can't isolate it here, but I know that there was an inquest yesterday about care and support through CAMS, and I just wonder if you could give me a few words to reassure me that our children in care have full and timely access to which I think might be linked to this other stuff as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Matthews. Yes, I can absolutely reassure you. Oh, sorry. Yes, I can reassure you that our children in care are prioritised by our CAMS colleagues, and our CAMS win in the CQC recent inspection was judged outstanding. So, yeah. But having said that, we are becoming aware that there are increasing mental health problems, and what we are looking at is how do we target those lower level needs so that we can respond quicker and they don't increase. So we've got a very good clear pathway that is where young people can access universal mental health support and hopefully address some of their worries and concerns before they begin to escalate and they require that quite significant intervention. We do lots of work with our foster carers. We do therapeutic parenting training with them. So again, they're quite well equipped to manage some of those difficulties that young people exhibit. But I think I'd like to say that overall, it's a challenge for many young people, not just our children in care.
So you understand that with the parents here.
Yeah. I don't know, Kieran, if you can pick up on, you're probably best placed to speak to the education.
Yeah, without getting into too many technicalities, if I could start with the children in care persistent absence rate, although we're reporting in Q4 2022, we're actually looking at the period of pandemic from September 2020 up through July 21. So that covers that period. Previously, that's the delay in the reporting process.
Councillor Matthews.
I'd be really pleased if you could explain that slowly and quietly to me.
Sure.
Because I thought
Sure.
we just heard this was for Q4.
So
you're now saying it's for the last 2 years.
So the way the data is produced is it's almost 18 months to 2 years behind. There's a delay in the data because the data has to funnel through the DFE and back through our performance. That's just the way things are. It's arcane, I fully get that, but that's the reality of it. It's beyond our control essentially as a local authority. So what we're looking at here in terms of this data is September 2020, so it's not even a quarter, it's a whole year from 2020 through to July 2021. And if we reflect, we've had many sleeps since then, I know, but actually that's through the period of pandemic when schools were actually closed. And the expectation on non-looked after children was that they didn't attend school, and for looked after children they had to attend. And as a consequence, the participation rate before the pandemic was around 5-6%. If I can explain, Councillor Matthews, this persistent absence rate is around the expectation that all kids attend at least 95% of the time. Yeah. So through this pandemic period, the children in care, 69% of them attended 95% of the time throughout the pandemic. The issue really came a challenge around January, when foster carers were making a decision as to whether they should send the kids to school or not. I'd like to reassure you that we are back. It's not January 22. I'm sorry. No, it's where am I? We're January. This year is 22. I'm talking about the previous year. Yeah. So it's January 21. We're talking about when the schools were closed. Okay. So as a consequence, so roughly 70% of our children, looked after children, 70% of them attended 95% of the time or more over that year. The expectation on non-looked after children was that schools didn't even have to report on their attendance. So in many ways, this is an anomaly in the data, really. Previous to that, if the rate was around 5-6%, we're back on that track now. So that's, as I say, that is essentially that data relates to the pandemic and that period, where foster carers rightly were making the choice as to whether it was appropriate to send the kids to school or not. The lead from the local authority was that they should send the kids to school, but obviously there were a lot of challenges around transport, some concerns around their own well-being, decisions made around reduced timetables for young people. So basically, their education was disrupted through that period, and as a consequence, that's what this data relates to.
Thank you, Kieran. I'm trying to get to the bottom of this in my head.
Yeah, sure,
and I'm a
sure, no
slow
problem.
thinker.
I get that.
So actually, this is a misleading,
Yeah.
a very misleading target.
It is, and I did have some discussions around whether it, whether we actually needed to be here because it is so anomalous.
Yeah.
But I think you could look at it two ways. You could look at it and say, my God Almighty, that's disgraceful, or you could look at it and say, well, 70% of the kids were attending 95% of the time through the pandemic, and that's pretty remarkable. So there are two ways to look at it.
Right. Well, I can understand with your explanation, but this is being reported as a Q4 report, and that's what I'm grappling to come to terms with. So I want to know how many of our children were in school till March 22. So that Q4. And can you give me an informal guide on that?
I can say, I don't want to hoist myself by my own petard on that, but we are more or less back on track to where we were pre-pandemic, essentially.
Which means it would be green rather than red.
Yes, it would.
So that historical delay is causing a problem. Thank you very much. That's helpful.
I hope that helps, yeah.
Thank you. A couple of points. In my position as Executive Support Councillor for Adult Education, I sit on the panel that looks at the offering that Lincolnshire gives for education. I just wanted to say that a couple of positives on that. Bernardo's are on that with us. I can't remember whether they've just joined or whether they've been there for a while. But Andy Morris has also joined us on that panel. And that is putting, as I'm sure you realise when he's involved, he's putting our children at the forefront. He's not a man to sit and listen without commenting in the nicest possible way. So positive things are happening that will help. I think it would be remiss if I didn't comment on 10 out of 18 of our things not being met. It is obviously disappointing, but there are exceptional circumstances, and as my colleagues have said, and I fully support them, we have a superb team looking after our children, and I know it concerns them, and I know we're dealing with it where we can. External forces are making life very, very difficult, and we can only do our best, but I have the confidence they will. I'm sure, as we've already heard, things will be improving the next time round. So I thank them for the efforts that they do. The panel was invited to consider the report and comment on the performance presented and recommend any actions or change. Have I got the right one? Oh, sorry, Councillor Matthews, far away.
Sorry, it was just that I'd asked a question and asked for commentary about the figures for engagement in learning 16, 17-year-olds, and the fact that we'd had additional money for the pilot, but the numbers were down, and I've not heard anything about that. In other words, was the pilot a waste of time? Were there other external reasons? Is this historical data? But just would really appreciate an answer on that before we move forward, please. Thank you.
Can I respond to that? Yeah.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. I can reassure you, Councillor Matthews, that it wasn't a waste of time. Actually, it was one of the most impactful things that I think I've ever done in relation to working with children in care. I think you referred last time we met to the actual data itself and what does participation mean. Well, essentially, it's a very narrow interpretation of what participation in learning means, in that they have to be in some form of education or training. I have a number of real success stories from the pilot around young people who just weren't interested in going to school, who just weren't interested in training, who wanted to get a job. And actually, we've been able to help them through the pilot to actually get onto that. So we've got 4 young people who are now employed, who are, you know, it seems counterintuitive, but they're not actually on this data. But, you know, so they act against us in some ways. But also it's given us the opportunity to actually look at how we can impact on those young people who are not in learning. And if you look at the data, 99% of our PEPs are completed on time, our personal education plans. And unlike every other local authority in the country, we actually have PEPs for kids who are not in school, who are not learning. And our full emphasis through the pilot was trying to get them back in, trying to get them interested in doing things like Abbey Access, for instance, so they can get certificates to go and work on building sites, etc., or get a driving license so they can access their new job at the co-op, or help them to get an interview, all of those things. So I can reassure you that the pilot, anecdotally from our perspective, was really worthwhile. It was worthwhile doing. When the DFE come out with their evaluation, I'm hoping they're going to say that it continues. We have contributed fully to that evaluation, and I'm just awaiting for the nod from the DFE to see if we can continue. I do plan to beg, steal or borrow if we don't get the funding next year. I'm hoping that we can still continue to do what we have been doing post-16, because I think it will be impactful. But the issue is that this is a huge, you know, mountain to move in the climate around the pandemic. Young people being used to not going to school, particularly in year 10 and 11, that has bled into year 12 and 13. There's no doubt about that. But I would like to reassure you that our PEPs, you know, are held regularly. When young people need a phone call, need a lift, need some advice, need to access some clothes for an interview, whatever it might be, the virtual school there is there to help. And I think those practical things are the things that really make the difference. And I'd also just like to reflect on the fact that, you know, there's 80% of the young people who are engaged in learning. Many of them will have been permanently excluded from school previously. Many of them will have a really patchy history on attendance previous to post-16. So the cohort is not a cohort that you would see in any other school, as it were. It is quite an exceptional cohort with quite exceptional individual challenges. So it's a difficult thing to address, but I think we're going about it in the right way, and I do think the post-16 project was eminently worthwhile.
May I just come back? It sounds as though I'm challenging. I'm just genuinely intrigued that you are working hard and doing phenomenally good stuff, but it's not moving the ship. And that's in the way it's reflected in the scores, and that's the point, that actually we're probably not getting collectively the credit we deserve for the work that we're doing. And is that another issue of historical data, i.e. is this stuff going back? Is it that we're measuring the wrong thing? There needs to be some explanation or mitigation of why that's not going up, but actually you're feeding back at a project, and we've heard good stuff is being done, but it's not being reflected in the figures. So are we up against it? We can never succeed on this one.
I think in terms of cohorts of young people, of children in care, it's a real challenge. You have to have a very thick skin to work in this area if you're constantly speaking to people around performance, around data, because cohorts of looked after children are so small that statistically small little changes make a huge difference. The other issue is that young people come into care with all sorts of different experiences. They all have their own specific individual challenges that need to be addressed on an individual basis. I don't think anybody in this room looks for success in terms of cohorts. I don't think that's the way we work. I think we actually try to work with individual young people, try to understand their needs and try to address them in a holistic way across children's services. That's how we work. And I think that has incremental impacts on the data, but I don't think you're ever going to make, unless somebody else can do the job in a different way and addresses it differently. And my experience suggests that isn't the way to go at it through cohorts. It's about working with individual young people. And I think as a consequence, you will only see small incremental increases. And occasionally, when the wheels fall off, sometimes, like the pandemic, you get large changes very, very quickly in a negative way.
Far be it from me to want to move the goalposts, but is it possible to receive a different type of report then that deals with the figures but mitigates them by the sort of explanation you've just given, by saying there are 39 children here, of which 26 have behavioural issues, the gender split. So actually we can show that we're doing good, not that we're failing.
I don't know whether I can actually answer that question, to be honest with you.
In asking it, I don't know if it's allowed, but it just seems that the backstory is not being told for our success.
I think one of the challenges, and we can go away and look at it, but this is not a stable cohort either. So if we had just like, we said 24 children, and they were the 24 children that we could work with over however long period of time it is, then I think we might see a different type of performance reporting. But this is not a stable cohort. This is a cohort that fluctuates. So, but Kieran and I can definitely have a look at. I doubt that we'll be able to change the performance indicator because it is a government one that we have to. But it might be that we can change the way that we present the figures to you.
I'm so sorry, Stephen, because Sorry, I'm not trying to suggest that we cheat the scoring system in any way. What I'm saying is it's not reporting fairly the good work that we're doing. But the other point you've raised there is churn, and you're talking about 24 children. Now you're almost suggesting that at the end of Q4, 75% of those 24 heads have changed. It would be really helpful to get some information on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of churn, that is the reality, but most of the data, well, I won't get into the technical bits because that will only confuse things even more. But yes, there is a large amount of churn within the cohort of children in care. But having said that, there are also a large number of young people who are with us over a long period of time, and the data, for what it's worth, does suggest that children who are in care for longer periods do achieve more. Although they don't match their peers, they do generally achieve better than those who aren't.
Microphone, please.
No, I'm really interested in this. Could we report on our client group who are there for longer periods of time and those who are churning? Because it clearly is messing up the performance outcomes of a team that's working its socks off.
Again, I'm not so sure. I suppose the reporting is around how we perform against other local authorities, how we perform against national statistics, and by and large, we're pretty much in line with those most of the time. The nitty-gritty stuff, I suppose, I don't know whether it would be worthwhile, perhaps you coming to see what the work of the virtual school is, what we do, have a discussion around the cohorts, all of those kinds of things. That may be, I don't know whether that's something that we would be, I'd be happy to try and facilitate that. I don't know whether, because much of the data is what is reported upon back to the DFE, and that's what the requirements are, so they filter through here. So I'm not so sure that we can change any of that. But the other point, of course, is that that's why we're here, I suppose. So, there's no such thing as a question that hasn't got any value. So, I mean, that's what we're here to do, is to add richness and provide the understanding. So, I presume, we can move forward together and better understand that as well through that process here.
Your oral feedback and evidence and data suggests that we're doing far better than is being reported here. And I'm just trying to wonder if there's a way we can capture that, not through what we have to return to DFE or through systems, but actually through some notes that associate this. And if there's any way that cohort can be split, as you say, to long-term statistics, or if we can show year-on-year graphing that shows improvement. I just think of 101 ways. And I appreciate the offer to come and see what you're doing. I'm not challenging that you're not working hard. That's truly not what or that the school isn't effective. I'm challenging that despite all of our hard work, we're having to report negative data.
Councillor Hayes, do you want to come back?
I'm going to keep mine a lot shorter than my colleague. I think that we in this room need to recognise that the data that's been provided in these tables might also reflect what happens in the general population of children of the same age with not going to school during the pandemic or logging on. And I think that just needs to be taken into consideration when we look at these figures. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. So the panel has considered the report and commented on the performance presented and recommended, I don't know if we recommend any actions at this stage, or changes to the Executive Councillor for the Children's Services, Community Safety and Procurement. I move the panel receives and endorses the report, that we are satisfied with the performance reported and the assurance and reason provided on areas where the targets have not been achieved. Can I ask you to raise your hands if you're in agreement, please? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Janice. And, yeah, thank you. Item 8, Lincolnshire Leaving Care Service Annual Report 21-22. This item on pages 37 to 44 of the pack provide the panel with an update on the Leaving Care Service provided by Bernardo's. And Lisa Adams, Service Manager, is going to do the report. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. So yeah, this is the annual report for Lincolnshire Leaving Care Service, currently delivered by Bernardo's on behalf of Lincolnshire County Council. This contract's been in place since April 2020 and is a 3-year contract with an additional 2 years if required. In the new contract, I'm saying new contract, the current contract, we dropped the age of the young people that we're working with, so we start picking up young people at 16 and work with the local authorities' children in care teams and sometimes their fast teams up until the young person's 18, and then they transfer over to our service at that stage. Most young people get a full service from the age of 18 to 21, and then some drop down to an advice and guidance service up to the age of 25. We do commissioning meetings with the local authorities, so our data and our work is scrutinised monthly, and we tend to hold in-person meetings every quarter. I just intend running through some of the different services that we have within Lincolnshire Leaving Care and provide you with just some case examples and hopefully interesting information. So we provide a supported lodging scheme, and that's linked with providing opportunities for young people aged 16 to 21 usually. We have 17 providers as of today across the county who provide up to about 23 beds for Lincolnshire young people. Alongside, I would guess, a number of housing options, the corporate parenting manager may suggest that supported lodgings is maybe a good option for a particular young person, where they get the opportunity to basically live in a household, they'd have their own room, and work would be done with that young person in relation to budgeting, as far as going to seeking education or employment, and general advice and guidance, really. We are measured on sort of providing good and safe accommodation for our care leavers, and generally that figure's tracking fairly high. Like I said, 94% as of March, March this year. What I would say is that even that cohort who are reviewed as in unsuitable accommodation, actually for the young person it's very suitable. So I can give an example where last year we had a young person who actually returned to her foster carers, but she was actually in a caravan on their drive. But actually for that young person, that placement was just the right place to live. It's what they wanted to do. They were getting the support from their previous foster carers. So although it would have been counted in those statistics as unsuitable, actually for that particular young person it was very suitable. We don't have a lot of young people who request not to have a service. We tend to try and keep in touch with a very high percentage of our Lincolnshire young people. Young people do have the opportunity to say they don't want a service. Although it's a statutory service, they don't have to engage, but there's very, very few who fit into that criteria. In relation to employment and training, I know we've already had a discussion about this group. We did run a workshop alongside the virtual school and the corporate parenting manager in April this year. And some of that soft data, Councillor Matthews, that you were sort of talking about was actually presented at that meeting. So I'm fairly confident that, again, alongside the corporate parenting manager, we can look at sort of how we presented that data in April and maybe look at providing further sort of opportunities like that, really, because we really sort of broke down what that cohort does look like. The local authority in Barnardo's have absolutely got eyes on the young people who are not in education, employment or training. We commissioned a piece of work earlier this year where we literally reviewed every single young person in that cohort and tried to look at what opportunities we could offer to maybe encourage them to seek employment. And if you just look on the top of page 40 of my report, again, this was the information that was presented in the April workshop, but it just shows that percentage of young people who are not in education and employment, and maybe gives a breakdown of that, you know, that some young people you won't get into that cohort. And like I said, we have talked about that a bit earlier, really. In the work that we did, mental health was certainly seen as an issue that was stopping some young people accessing employment and training. And as a service and as a partnership really with health and with the local authority, we funded, there's been 2 new posts within our team. One's a specialist mental health worker and one is what we call a wellbeing worker. So again, just trying to make some of those small changes with young people that would encourage them onto the next step of employment or training. We have built up and continue to have a good relationship with Serco. They help provide some mentoring for some young people. We're on round 5 of a mentoring programme with them. So we basically match up some of our care leavers with members of staff at Serco, and they'll do with them what they want. So it might be about preparation for job interview. It might be around looking at CVs. It might be looking about finding some volunteering or some work experience opportunities for them. So that partnership seems to be going from strength to strength, really. It's something that Serco have now decided to rule out nationwide. So Lincolnshire, like I said, were the first to do so. That was very positive. Just moving on to participation and fundraising. Again, we've got a specialist worker whose job is to sort of look at participation opportunities for us. I've got to say that we have got Lincolnshire a lot more on the map, a lot more out there. We've had some young people just very recently down at the House of Commons last week before, I'm looking at Ben, in the middle of all of the rail strikes, dare I say, going and contributing to the care review that was done and having the opportunity to meet with local MPs, with Josh McAllister, who led that review. One of Lincolnshire's care leavers has had the piece of artwork that they designed in service go on front of the Barnardo's national flyer around the care review, which was great. I understand you had one of your looked after children on news round for that opportunity as well.
Watch
Ben.
this space. There may be a clip of that later.
Oh, sorry, I don't want to rush in and steal that for you. And we've also done some filming opportunities with our young people. I attached the link in the report, which was around looking at our supported lodging scheme. And we've also doing a small film with a company called My Pockets, which again features a number of voices of our looked after children and care leavers. They'll be credited on that film as well. So as soon as that becomes available, I will make sure that that's sent round for you to have a look at. And I guess as well, when I look at, because we're asked in commissioning to look at the added value that Barnardo's maybe bring, I've just tried to talk about some of the money that we brought into service, the money that we've been able to use with our care leave, which has been donation money, from a number of local organisations. The Orthodox, the Greek Methodist Church here is a great supporter of Barnardo's, and like I said, we always end up with Christmas gifts and things like that from them. We've got some food bank in Louth that again has provided some excellent links for our care leavers. Morrison's, we managed to get into one of the local Morrison's and got donations from there, which we used around Christmas. And we also used some of that specific donation money for one-off purchases for young people when they've maybe already used their new home grant to maybe need something additional. And I've got to say, recently, the corporate parenting manager and myself have contributed to a young person who has just done exceptionally well, who wasn't even going to college or university and is now in a job, and we've helped provide an electric bike for that young person to aid them to be able to get them to their employment. So there have been some great opportunities like that. I guess new initiatives, like I said, have been really around the commissioning, the joint commissioning of the mental health specialist and the wellbeing worker. Again, that's contract monitored, so just so that you know that we've got eyes on that every month, just to make sure that they're delivering and absolutely reaching out to Lincolnshire care leavers, really. We've also seen some new posts within who are looking to work with our unaccompanied asylum seekers. Again, Andy, I know will be able to give you the figures, but because of the national referral system, we've seen a fairly big increase in unaccompanied asylum seeking young people arriving in Lincolnshire. And of course, what happens there is they come in and they will be registered as a child in care. And then, like I said, potentially staying with our service for 9 years then. So it's a fairly big commitment and a big part of the work that we do. We continue to run some what we call service development sessions within my service, and I guess what that does, it makes sure that we capture what young people want, what they say they want to develop, and we also ask them when we're developing new policies and procedures their views on that. So that's again another area of participation really that young people are contributing to. And like I said, those groups are chaired by myself, but like I said, I have representation across the service, including young people, which is great. I guess we do continue, and I suppose my final point, we do continue to see a turnover of staff in my service. But I guess what I would say is that that's usually to the benefit of the local authority. If I look at the figures for the past 12 months, 6 out of the 10 members of staff actually transferred over to local authority and came and joined generally or early help service. So we do see a churn around that, and we are continuing to recruit really. We're a service of about 50 members of staff, so we're a fairly big service. And like I said, but the management team is a very stable and strong management team. And like I said, we continue to be, like I said, work very hard and work in partnership with the local authority, really. We absolutely recognise, although we have the Barnardo's banner, they're Lincolnshire young people, and that's absolutely at the heart of what we aim to deliver, really. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Councillor Higgs.
Thank you, Chairman. Lisa, on the table that you've got on page 39, do we provide the people that opt out of training and education and employment, do we make constant contact with them to find if they need help, and do they have a point of contact if they want to get in touch because of their circumstances change or find that they're in difficulty?
Yeah, so that cohort would still all have leaving care workers, so there would always be an immediate point of contact. And we do have the specialist workers who deal with employment and training. And again, they monitor that group. So it's a group of 148 as of, like I said, that was certainly the figures that we brought to that April meeting. And they are absolutely targeted to try and look at opportunities that we can create to make them access really training and employment. So absolutely, eyes are absolutely on that group. Yeah.
Councillor Matthews. I was going to ask you anyway.
Thank you, and thank you very much for your comment about soft data. I think you understood what I was asking, and it clearly has been dealt with, and I just wonder if we could see that at this. I was trying to do the math here, and I'm referring to the table that Councillor Rosa has referred to. March 2022, 94% of people access to maintain suitable safe accommodation. 429 care leavers in this period. Does that mean there are 24 young people on the street somewhere? No, I just see.
No, that's fine. No, that's fine. We within our crikey, I'd be having a heart attack. Within our monthly commissioning data, we provide narrative around every young person who is not in suitable accommodation. And obviously, a bit like you talked about that data, it can shift every month about who that is. But as far as being street homeless, no. That absolute. I'm saying it doesn't happen without other options being offered to that young person. No young person in Lincolnshire is street homeless who hasn't been offered a range of different options from both ourselves, the local authority, and the district councils. And like I said, there are within that as well. Again, there's a couple of young people, and again, they're on that monthly data who have. For example, there was an unaccompanied asylum seeker who came into Lincolnshire and literally disappeared the next day. That young person would sit on those statistics because we still try and trace that young person, so they sort of sit on those stats really. But no, as far as being street homeless, no. And the other data that we also give every week, and again, those decisions are made, is if we have to use a bed and breakfast accommodation for a young person because maybe the district council aren't able to see them till the next day, no bed and breakfast accommodation is agreed without the corporate parenting manager and Janice being aware of that. They make the decision around that. And again, but I've got to say, generally week on week, that isn't the case. We are sending back a nil return. There would be exceptional circumstances around that. So again, yes, we absolutely understand that cohort and we report weekly if it's a bed and breakfast, but like I said, there's none of those at the moment, and monthly on that individual cohort. Yeah.
That's great news. Can you explain what the 6% does represent then? Where are they? What are they doing? That's all, please.
Yeah, so it could be around, so again, like I said, it's around, there's a couple that are missing, so we know who they are and that they're missing. It could be like I said, the example I gave where a young person is choosing to stay with friends, choosing to stay with family, and we don't feel that is appropriate accommodation, so they would be in that cohort as well. We have stripped out of that cohort those in prison, haven't we? So they're stripped out. Oh, they're not there in there. So again, young person who are in prison would also feature in there. So yeah, there aren't any street homeless young people in Lincolnshire at the moment that are care leavers who haven't been offered, who haven't also got a tenancy or have been offered that.
Thank you very much, Lisa. I've got no questions myself. Thank you for the report. I move that we receive the report and update provided and that we are satisfied with the service provision to our care leavers, and furthermore I ask that our comments from the discussions as recorded are taken under consideration by the service provider. Can I ask you to raise your hand if you're in agreement, please? Thank you very much. That is agreed. So we move on to 9, which is Legal Services Lincolnshire End of Year Report, April 2021 to March 2022. The Corporate Parenting Panel is asked to consider and comment on this verbal update and presentation. The update will be presented by Jodie Ogden, Senior Lawyer, Child Care. Jodie is attending via Teams, I understand. Over to you, Jodie.
Good morning all. I am also present with Sarah Cragg. I don't know whether you can hear me or see me. I can see myself twice, unfortunately.
Yeah, we can see and hear you. Thank you.
Fantastic. And I'm hoping that the slides available are also available to you. Kiara, are they currently being set up, please? Fantastic. Okay, so myself and Sarah just wanted to give a refresher really in terms of Legal Services Lincolnshire and where we fall within the structure of corporate parenting really. So if you could just move to the next slide, please. Just an overview of the team. Myself and Sarah are both senior lawyers in the team, and we are currently headed by the acting principal lawyer, Nicola Corby. And then we also have a cohort of 8 lawyers, 10 legal officers and 2 trainee solicitors who are in the process of undertaking a bespoke childcare law training contract. And that training contract has actually been successful for 2 of our current lawyers. So that is something that we're using to develop in the team at the moment. In addition to the internal individuals that I've just referred to, we also instruct a private firm of solicitors, A&N Care, who offer legal advice on up to 30 to 35 cases across the county, and their team also consists of 5 lawyers and support staff in addition to that, and that's ultimately to maintain the workload that's coming through from our client department. So ultimately, legal services support all of the 8 district areas in the county, and that continues to be the case. And we ultimately offer a layer of safeguarding support to children's services to offer legal advice relating to children in the county. So in the event that a social worker or the social work team feels that their concerns cannot be managed at a lesser level, such as team around the child, child in need or child protection, ultimately their managers have the resources to come and seek legal advice to look at what next steps are available to them. So any matters that do progress within our legal services team are allocated to a designated lawyer who are supported by a one-to-one legal officer, so that they can have that go-to sort of one-to-one advice on a day-to-day basis should that be required. And in addition to those allocated matters, we also run a duty scheme within our team, whereby there is always a duty lawyer and a duty legal officer available to cover for any urgent inquiries which may arise. If we can go to the next slide, please, and I'll pass to my colleague, Sarah. Thank you.
Good morning. So I'm just going to do a quick overview of what it is specifically that legal services gets involved in. So Jodie's just alluded to the fact that we run a duty scheme, and the first port of call for social workers is to contact the duty lawyer and request a legal planning meeting, or LPM as we like to call it, and that's where legal will provide initial advice about whether the legal threshold is met to either start pre-proceedings or to issue court proceedings. The next step of legal involvement would be the pre-proceedings process, and this is often where parents first come into contact with legal. This process involves holding a meeting with parents where we discuss the local authority's concerns and try to set out a plan of what can be done to avoid the matter needing to be taken to court. This is a really important process, as it can result in families making changes which reduce the concerns and therefore mean that legal involvement is no longer required. And it also is important as in the event that families aren't able to make changes, it allows a period of time where evidence can be gathered prior to care proceedings being issued. And our internal sort of data gathering has shown that that reduces the length of and cost of court proceedings for the local authority. There has been an increased focus on the pre-proceedings process recently as a result of a public law working group report, which was commissioned by the President of the Family Division. And this stressed the importance of a robust pre-proceedings approach. I'm pleased to confirm that Lincolnshire was already implementing a lot of the recommendations of the report, and we do have a really robust pre-proceedings process within our team. This involves legal advice being taken from 14 weeks of pregnancy in relation to unborn babies to make sure that assessments and support are put in place well in advance of birth. And it also, for babies and children that are already born, we aim to get the pre-proceedings process completed within 16 weeks so that there is a reduced delay in decision making for those children. The slide that's currently before you just sets out some of our statistics in terms of the success that we've had with pre-proceedings being able to avoid court proceedings being issued. And so you'll see that in 2020 to 2021, we were successful in diverting 81 cases away from court proceedings, which represented about half of those that we were involved in. And for the year just gone, we've diverted 51 so far, and there are 26 that are still ongoing and yet to be decided. So the pre-proceedings process forms a really important part of our work and helping those families to make changes. If we could move to the next slide for Jodie, please.
That will never get old, will it, the mute thing? So just moving on to when we've exhausted pre-proceedings that Sarah's just explored with you, that may then result in an application to the court being made, because ultimately we cannot manage it outside of having court oversight anymore. So in the event that a child or children are deemed to be at risk of significant harm, which cannot be managed outside of court proceedings, then we may be instructed by the client department to make an application for a public law order. So ordinarily we would make the application for either an interim care order or an interim supervision order. However, there are other orders available to the court and the local authority, whichever fits best for the child or children. Ultimately, a care order, as set out on the slide there, grants the local authority shared parental responsibility along with the parents or any other person who has parental responsibility. An interim supervision order, however, allows the local authority to aid, assist and befriend the children rather than having that additional parental responsibility at that stage. Ultimately, when an interim care order or interim supervision order is granted by the court, this triggers the statutory responsibilities of the local authority. And it's ultimately with the interim care order in particular that we then become the corporate parent of that child or children subject to proceedings, and that's for the duration of the order. So all of those statutory requirements, such as the child in care reviews and the medicals, will all be triggered from that process. Ultimately, once proceedings are issued, legal services will be instructed by the social work teams and managers to represent them in court proceedings. That will either be directly by either myself, Sarah, or another member of the team, or by the use of counsel subject to the complexity of the case. As you'll appreciate, and today is illustrative of hybrid ways that we've been accustomed to over the last couple of years, the court have had to adapt over the last couple of years as to how we manage court hearings to keep this process going and to avoid significant delay for children. And ultimately, they're commenced with multiple ways of attending remote hearings, whether that be by phone, by Microsoft Teams, by Skype for Business, or more recently used the cloud video platform. Ultimately, at this point in time, the court uses a bit of a hybrid sort of approach. So in the event that people are required to attend court, they are considering who needs to be in attendance at the court building, to prevent as much footfall as possible, but also to ensure that justice is being considered appropriately and parties' cases are being put forward in the best possible way. So those hybrid ways of working are certainly continuing. And the president of the family division has recently set out that he would prefer for more in-person hearings, but unfortunately we're not quite out of the COVID pandemic yet, and we will ultimately be guided on a case-by-case basis, but we have seen fair outcomes being achieved over the last 2.5 years, which shows that we can adapt to this way of working. In addition to court proceedings, you'll see on the slide before you that we also offer legal advice for permanence planning for children. So in the event that all options have been exhausted for the children to remain within the family, the legal department also offer independent arm's length legal advice to the assistant director to ensure that the agency decision maker can consider whether adoption is the best option for a child. Ultimately, this advice will be delivered by a lawyer without conduct of the case to give that arm's length view. They will do a brief summary and overview of the file to ensure that all considerate options have been looked at, to then give independent legal advice to the agency decision maker at that point. In the event that an adoption order is then made later on within proceedings, if that is contested by a parent, again, legal services will be instructed at that point to assist the social work team in presenting the local authority's case as to why an adoptive placement is the best placement for that particular child. In addition to the public law orders that I've touched upon, legal services are also instructed on occasions for private law matters, such as Section 37 proceedings, whereby the court requests the local authority look into something as to whether a child is at significant harm and whether a court order is required. In addition, we are instructed on discharge of care orders, revocation of placement orders, and also more recently there has been an increase in deprivation of liberty applications before the court, both in the High Court and also in the Court of Protection that our team is currently working with. So if we could just move to the next slide, please, to give an indication with regards to some figures over the last year. I must say these are approximate figures because I'm still in the process of liaising with the case manager for the firm figures. However, since April of 2021, there have been in excess of 150 public law applications to the court, and that relates to over 256 children. And out of those matters, those that have concluded already, there have been a range of orders that the court have granted following the conclusion of proceedings, which range from the full care orders, which ultimately is the responsibility of this group as the local authority being the corporate parent. And in addition to those care orders that are made, other orders such as placement orders, special guardianship orders where the children remain in kinship care, or supervision orders where they remain outside of local authority care are also considered and approved by the court within this locality. There are also on occasions hearings where there are no order made at the conclusion of proceedings, whether that's because of progression made within the proceedings or the evidence that becomes available, resulting in the local authority withdrawing their application. But again, all of these orders are considered and approved and ultimately endorsed by the court in terms of the next steps. If we can go to the next slide, please, and I'll pass back to Sarah.
So Jodie's already mentioned that legal provides an extension of safeguarding for the client department, and this is just a bit of further information about how we go about that. So one of the main jobs that the solicitors get involved with in our team is considering evidence before it's sent to court, and we do this for both public law proceedings and also some private law proceedings which arise between parents in the family court that the local authority isn't necessarily a party to. Legal review this evidence before it's sent to court to make sure that the local authority has met the legal tests that are required in order to ensure it obtains the orders needed to protect the child and make sure our evidence is robust as possible. And legal are also obviously involved in keeping the social work teams up to date about any court developments. And we're fortunate within Lincolnshire to have developed really positive working relationships with other agencies, which ensure that our local protocols are kept up to date and that our court process also runs smoothly. And this involves quarterly meetings with CAFCAS to ensure that we're working on the same to ensure compliance with the same things. And we also have regular meetings with the police, and these provide an opportunity to address any issues that have arisen, either case specific or more generally with both of those agencies. If we could go on to the next slide, please.
As touched upon by Sarah, we have a really close working relationship from a multidisciplinary perspective, and what's set out there is that we have a close regular liaison with the court. So this includes our acting principal lawyer along with the Assistant Director of Children's Services, Janice Spencer, meeting with the designated family judge, Judge Clark, on a 4-weekly basis at the moment. And again, these meetings are hugely beneficial for sharing information, ensuring local protocols are complied with, in addition to ironing out any issues as and when they arise to avoid the snowball effect effectively. So if there's any case law or guidance from the President of the Family Division, this is all discussed within this meeting and ultimately drip fed both to legal services and the team that are working within the team, but also to children's services and the client and the social work teams working with children. So again, we've got that ability to evidence that we are compliant with all of these protocols that are in place for the safety of the children and for the progression of court proceedings. So in addition to CAFCAS, the court and the other agencies that Sarah has also mentioned, both Sarah and I also have regular meetings with the local Family Justice Board. This ultimately is chaired by the judiciary, but also has members of CAFCAS, Barristers Chambers Council, court staff, private practitioner solicitors, all present, ultimately with the same aim to ensure that there is smooth running of cases as best as we can possibly achieve within the area. Within the local Family Justice Board, there are a number of subgroups, whether that's to deliver training, whether that's to consider data for either private law, proceedings or public law proceedings. And again, we are very much involved in those public law subgroups so that we can look at the data available, we can look at the length of time the proceedings are taking and identify any themes that we can, in the hope that we can bring those timescales down. Because again, unfortunately, there has been an extensive amount of weeks over and above the usual 26-week target over the last couple of years, again because of the COVID pandemic. But there are other themes such as expert instruction, the requirement to test out placements a bit more, the requirement to consider the care plans more, which have all led to a delay in final orders ultimately being made. Obviously, what we try to do in those circumstances is to reduce the impact on the children or the child subject to the proceedings to ensure that they are being either in their current placement so that there is a less of an impact on them when the proceedings conclude, or there is a clearly planned transition so that the child themselves know what the route is as best as we can inform them at that stage to avoid any impact to them. Again, I've already touched upon the need for changing within the court field over the last couple of years in the terms of remote and hybrid hearings, and the local authority were instrumental in arranging court hubs across all of the district offices within the county council to allow for parents and their legal representatives to attend court together to make sure that these were effective hearings. Whilst these aren't being used as much more recently because the court are allowing individuals in the court buildings, and more solicitors' offices are open as well to accommodate their own clients with their own counsel and representatives at their offices. But that certainly gave us a leap in the right direction with regards to making sure that proceedings could continue and could be productive and allow matters to proceed despite the difficult times. If I could pass to the next slide, please.
So we're just going to move forward now to looking at how things are changing in the future. One of the main changes is the development of the family public law online system. I think we referenced that this was starting up when we gave this presentation last year, and it's now running full throttle with still some teething issues, but it is definitely allowed for the system to become more efficient as everybody can track the case that's involved, including the judge and all the parties, and have instant access to the papers once they're uploaded. This differs from the previous system, which was the court holding paper files. From a local authority perspective, from within our team, it's certainly been a learning curve, but we can really see that it started to make things more efficient. An example is that waiting times for court orders to be produced has really come down, as they can just be done instantly once the judge clicks the button, which means that we can get the cases concluded, get the orders out to those that need them, and close them down, which is really positive. Jodie's already mentioned the focus on transitioning, going back into the court building, but as she said, there is an increase in in-person hearings, and the court is really clear that they want to look at getting back to normal, as it were, and getting more people back in the building to look at things how they were before. A big focus moving forward is to reduce the number of hearings that we have as part of a case. So there's usually more than one court hearing whilst decisions are being made, and both within our team locally and nationally, there's a focus on reducing the number of hearings that are required so that we can make sure that cases conclude closer to the 26-week time limit, which is enshrined in law as the time in which care proceedings should ideally be concluded. We are still dealing with a bit of COVID backlog, which is affecting our figures in terms of the number of weeks proceedings are taking. The average length in Lincolnshire is currently at 54 weeks, but this is in line with the national picture, and that is a figure that is coming down as we move further away from those COVID interruptions. If we just want to move to the next slide, please.
And again, just continuing with being future focused, and we've already touched upon it between us in terms of the Public Law Working Group best practice guidance. This is a report that was published back in March of 2021, which covers a raft of information over the 191 pages, covering ultimately best social work practice relating to child protection and also family court process and proceedings. And as Sarah touched upon with regards to the pre-proceedings, it's got a real focus on pre-proceedings and the multidisciplinary intervention that the local authority can offer to parents, so that we can ultimately evidence to the court that any application to the court is the last resort and everything has been tried in the first instance to avoid the need for court and judicial oversight. So the best practice guidance has also been underpinned with the DFE initiative of the Build Back Better initiative, and this is something ultimately that is dovetailing across the local authority practice at the moment. And whilst we deal with it from a legal perspective to ensure that that front loading, that early intervention and questions ultimately are asked in terms of what has happened before it's come to legal, the social workers are really driving this forward across all of the districts across the county, and that's ultimately supported by our case manager, Anne Woolard. Legal services have a really close working relationship with Anne, and she ultimately picks out what is required from that best practice guidance and the Build Back Better initiative, so that we can have templates available to social workers so that the best evidence and best analysis can be presented to the court in the event that that's where we're going with the proceedings. So Anne has been instrumental in sorting out the templates. She's ultimately put together a regional tool pack so that that is used by both legal departments and also the social workers on the ground to ensure that there is a consistency with regards to the evidence that's being presented to the court. But again, it's about that early intervention, the front loading, trying to avoid the need for proceedings in the event that we can manage risks outside of needing that judicial oversight. Another project that's been in the pipeline now for a few years, and certainly it was tested in a couple of areas but has now been widened across all of the districts across the county, is the Time Project. And this is ultimately an intervention where there are specific early help workers within the areas who offer support to repeat mothers who often face public law proceedings for their children, and the early help workers will work with the mothers to ultimately try and break that cycle to avoid those repeat proceedings. If there are any support needs that they have, they will certainly signpost, they will give that assistance to the parents and the mothers, really, to be able to access that so that we can then hopefully avoid proceedings if they go on to have children in the future. I understand that that has resulted in some matters probably coming to us at pre-proceedings level because of our previous involvement, but ultimately we've been able to divert it from proceedings at that level because the early help intervention work has really supported that parent to be able to address the concerns so that they can evidence that they are now in a better position to provide care for their child. So again, it's that emphasis on working together, the multidisciplinary aspect, and ultimately where legal services can support the social work teams and early help work teams in implementing that. So that's really where we are in terms of being future focused. And I would now welcome any questions to Sarah and I if there are any.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions? No? Okay, thank you both very much for a very comprehensive report. You look to have covered everything. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, so we now move on to item 10. Sorry, no, we don't. I move that the panel receives the verbal update that we are satisfied with the efforts of the legal team and that our comments with the discussions as recorded are taken under consideration. Can I ask you to raise your hands if you're in agreement, please? Yeah, thank you very much. Then that's agreed. So we do now move on to item 10, which is Voices for Choices, V4C, update report. The panel is invited to consider the report, comment on the information received on the performance of the service in terms of activities and meetings undertaken within the given report period, and to contribute our views in relation to future planning and delivery of V4C meetings and activities. Ben Lilly is to present this. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Yes, as Councillor Rowe said, this report gives a summary of all matters pertaining to our Voices for Choices groups over February to June 2022. And Voices for Choices just is our branded name for our Children in Care Council. So the point being of these meetings with the Children in Care Council is about gaining the views of children and young people to help inform and develop the services we deliver. So I'll just talk you through the 4 monthly meetings. The report talks about Lincoln and West Lindsey as a starting point, and discussions over this time in these meetings have very much been focused on getting feedback from children and young people about their holiday activities, their views on holiday time, and also discussions about mental health and physical health and well-being. Members of the groups generally have felt that they have a good selection of activities to attend in holiday times, and also that in terms of their health and well-being, they have a good range of support networks to talk to if they're struggling at all. Across Boston and South Holland, again, focus on discussing mental health issues, physical health issues, activities over the holiday periods. We were looking at concentrating on these topics to feed into the overall big conversation meeting in June, which I'll talk about in due course. Generally across these groups, it's felt that in terms of feedback around leisure times and holiday activities, there's a good range of options for them. Although what they did comment on across some of the meetings is that sometimes they don't feel they always get the information that's passed on to them. So that's something to think about. Again, across East Lindsey, there's some feedback in that particular meeting about health and mental health, and also about how we can develop and improve attendances for some of these meetings that they've given us feedback on. They did also talk about some discussions about holiday activities specifically in those meetings in terms of barriers to attendance and things around costs and transport and taxis not showing up and future other ideas that they would like to be involved in. Across North Kesteven and South Kesteven, moving through the report, generally asked the questions, similar questions again, and some feedback around challenges in terms of transport and not wanting to travel too far, and sometimes costs being expensive. So what happens in these big conversation meetings on a monthly basis? We then feed into a meeting that brings the meetings together into a single meeting, and that's our big conversation event. That's held in the daytime in holiday period. In half term, it was held in Skegness this time. And this is an opportunity for the children and young people to attend a meeting with senior leaders and councillors here at this meeting today to have discussions and give feedback. Quite a positive meeting, some really good feedback at the meeting. There was some good updates from Janice in particular about improving broadband and internet access within children's residential homes, which is being acted on. So that's really good. And at the end of this, at the end of the big conversation, we run like a fun activity for them, which this time was at the High Ropes in Skegness, and there's some pictures attached to this report. Don't go there if you don't like heights, is my advice. So in terms of V4C and planning and where we are at, we are undertaking ongoing attempts to raise awareness of V4C to increase the attendances. As you can see from the report, compared to the last report, the attendances are stable, but we want them to be higher. So some of the things we're currently looking at and currently doing is that the Children's Services participation teams are visiting Children's Services frontline teams, and they've been to the children in care teams, fostering teams, virtual school teams over the past month to raise awareness of our participation work generally, but also to specifically talk about V4C and request that we get referrals for children and young people to be encouraged to come and attend the meetings. We've also put in place quite a bit of new publicity regarding V4C that's been shared with teams and is on our intranet page, and we're obviously continuing to send out further information regarding V4C to foster carers via the foster carer newsletter on an ongoing basis. One of the things that we've had feedback from the teams is that it'd be really good if a film clip could be produced which has V4C members talking about V4C and what it involves and how it helps them, with the idea that that can be shared with all the frontline staff, and then they can share that with the children and young people that they work with to hopefully encourage more attendance. We also undertake an analysis of home postcodes of our children in care to look at where our meetings are taking place to make sure that they are in the correct place. So, for example, there isn't much point in having a meeting in Stamford when there's very few children and young people in care there. So we hold the meetings in that particular area where the most are, such as Grantham, and we're looking at that on an ongoing basis to see if we have that right. One of the things that I've mentioned in the report is the big conversation, but following on from that, there wasn't time to put that in this report, but there has been, like Lisa referred to earlier, we took a group of children and young people in care and care leavers to London to feed into the National Care Review and to talk about experiences for children in care. Part of that day, and it was at the House of Commons, but part of that day there was an interview. We arranged for one of our children in care to be interviewed by the BBC, by Newsround, and it was a great interview that this young person delivered, and it's available to be seen on the BBC via their website, and there's a link to it. I know it was shared, whether you want to see it today or share in the minutes, the choice is yours, but I know the young person would be thrilled if he knew that people were watching it in this meeting today.
I think we should be prepared to let him be thrilled. So yes.
This is Callum.
Sorry that... Okay. Sorry that was a bit quiet, but I think we can follow the link if we want to go and listen to it properly at a first stage. Right, Ben, thank you.
Yes, so just in summary and conclusion, we are trying to maintain ongoing efforts to increase our attendance and engagement of children and people attending our Children in Care Councils meetings. We've received anecdotal feedback that from staff in particular that they feel that children and people are more likely to attend if the meetings were held in daytimes rather than in the evenings due to the late finishes in the evenings and the time it takes to get home from an evening meeting. It's quite a late finish for some of the children and young people. So we've tried to formalise that a bit because we've developed a survey that's gone out to frontline staff and carers over the last week just to gain views from them around how they think VC could be structured and when meetings could be held to increase, hopefully, our engagement attendance of children and people attending. So we'll report back on that in the future. But when we compare the attendances at the evening meetings to the big conversation meetings, which are held in the daytime in school holiday periods, we seem to get higher attendance at the daytime meetings. So it's a thought to consider. So I just wanted to give that feedback that we are trying as best we can to develop and increase the attendances of the meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? No, that's great. So I did attend the big conversation, and once again I found it very good. So some points were raised that maybe wouldn't have been picked up previously, and I know Heather and Janice were onto a couple of things straight away. The children seem to be involved. They want to get involved. I watched some go from, I'm not going to say anything to anybody, I'm just going to sit here and wait for something to eat, to absolutely being full of it. It did work extremely well and seems to work very well. I must admit, I looked at the turnout for some of the other sessions, and when you see one person there, that might produce something that's very important, but it would be nice to get those numbers up, but I know you're working on that. Thank you very much, Ben. I move that we receive the report and update provided, and that we are satisfied with the overall activities and meetings undertaken, and furthermore, I ask that our comments from the discussions as recorded are taken under consideration in planning ahead for activities and meetings for the next year. Once again, could I ask you to raise your hand if you're in agreement, please? Okay, thank you very much. That is agreed. So we now move on to item 11. This item on page 53 to 55 of the agenda pack enables the panel to comment on the content of its own work programme. The report will be presented by Chiara. The corporate parenting panel is asked to agree the work programme and identify any items for future meetings. Thank you, Chiara.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So on page 54, what you have is the work programme as this has been shaped for the months of September and November 2022, and we're currently working to develop the programme for the rest of 2023. So in the next meeting, we will receive the Children in Care performance measures for Q1 of 2022-2023, which covers the period between April to June 2022. We shall receive the Adoption Annual Report and Statement of Purpose, the Fostering Annual Report and Statement of Purpose, the Fostering Quarterly Performance Report for Q1, and the Corporate Parenting, Children in Care and Care Leavers Strategy Priorities and Action Plan Update. And this concludes my update to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions on that? That's great, thank you. So I move that we note the report and approve the existing work programme as detailed in pages 53 to 55 of the agenda pack. Once again, if you could raise your hands if you're in agreement. Thank you, then that is agreed. Before I end the meeting, there was some things that I meant to bring into the chairman's report at the beginning that, to be honest, I missed. I've been visiting several of the children's homes over the last few months. I'm doing this in a purely informal way. It's not to replace or back up or have anything to do with the visiting members thing. I just wanted to give a bit of feedback that I've been to the Boston Respite Centre, I've been to Spalding, Gainsborough, I've been to Sleaford. I go as the visiting member to the Sleaford Secure Centre as well. I very impressed with the relationship between the staff and the children. I went to the first one not knowing what to say. I said to Andy the other day, I didn't know whether I was going to have to get past the razor wire, get through the gates, see bars on windows. I just got no idea. And I must say that I was so impressed with the interaction and the relationship. I've come back with the odd report from each home, which I've passed on. Janice must be absolutely fed up with people mentioning Wi-Fi that's not very good. And I know she is totally on top of it. So I think one of the best things that's going to change very quickly is the Wi-Fi side. So I just wanted to update that and just let people know what I'm doing. So it is now 11:45 and it's the end of the meeting, and I'd like to thank you all for attending. Thank you very much.